Hello, and welcome back to Susty Talk. Edie's content director, Luke Nichols here. I hope you're all safe and well. It's the morning of Thursday, the 16th of April, and we're here for episode 3 of our new Susty Talk series, which is all about keeping our audience of sustainability and energy professionals talking, feeling connected, and remaining stubbornly optimistic, to use Christiana Figueres' language, through this period of lockdown here in the UK and beyond. And joining us for this episode of Susty Talk, we have Jo Gilroy, who's the Head of Sustainability and Environment at the construction firm Kier Group. Jo, thanks so much for joining us. We had a few connectivity issues earlier, so hopefully my Wi-Fi won't sort of ruin the chat again. Firstly, most importantly, how are you doing amidst this sort of challenging situation, and talk us through your lockdown setup?
Oh goodness, well, hi Luke, and thanks very much for inviting me along to this Susty Talk. And yeah, so I am currently in my lounge, so I'm working from home as well as the rest of the team. So we're all adhering to the government advice of staying at home where possible and then maintaining our distance when we go out for our daily exercise. Work is still continuing. In the same way as we had before, we just don't have that physical contact. So we're still quite busy trying to maintain momentum around the sustainability initiatives that we had going before, but also ensuring that we maintain environmental compliance on the ground. That is our critical activity at the moment. But it's certainly interesting. I used to really enjoy working from home. Working from home on a Friday was a real highlight of the week. You got through all your admin. It was a really nice way to finish the week. I have a new perspective on working from home now. And I think like a lot of people, actually, this whole lockdown has made us acutely aware of what we took for granted. I mean, everything from being able to just quickly pop to the shop because you run out of milk. I've never ever before had to plan for having enough milk, but I have to plan that now because otherwise you've got to go and stand in quite a long queue. And also taking for granted just being able to jump on the train, go see your friends, go and have a quick drink, go and have a debrief, especially if you've had a challenging day. A quick gin and tonic. Can't do any of that now unless it is in a virtual environment. So I think we're all acutely aware of those.
Absolutely. No, I completely can sympathise with that. At 10:30 in the morning, but happy to talk about gin and tonics any day of the week. Yeah, I mean, it's those small things, isn't it? And who'd have thought you'd miss the kind of those sort of almost like the water cooler chats at work, and the little things that just the office environment is you realise how important that kind of thing is to keep you going.
Absolutely.
So Kier is obviously a massive business, I think 20,000 plus employees.
All right.
Tell us about how the current situation is impacting your team and the people that you're sort of working with directly around. Are you still kind of in contact with people in your team?
Yeah, so we've made a real effort as a team to always have weekly catch-ups, sort of weekly virtual meetings, even if it's just like a virtual coffee session. So we have a number of meetings that are in the professional sense. So okay, what are our priorities this week? What are our challenges this week? Have we got any areas that we're concerned about? And then we also have the meetings where it's very much about talking about the team's well-being, how they're feeling, how they're coping, how their family's doing. So I try and hold both meetings and also to split them out so that you can literally just over a cup of coffee on Microsoft Teams chat about how your team are doing. So we make a real effort around that. And I do make them all put on their video as well. So it is actually quite entertaining to see who's done a home DIY haircut, or who wasn't quite prepared for the Teams call. So they're not, they are still trying to hide the fact that they are in their pajamas because it's been a bit of a late morning. But we make a real point of staying in contact as a team. I think a lot of them are. They're still fighting the good fight. They're still keeping morale up. But I think, like everybody, we have days that you wake up and think, yeah, I'm going to be really productive. I've got this today. And then you have other days where you just think, God, this situation is really heavy. This situation is still almost unbelievable. I don't know if you're the same, Luke. I still have periods whereby I have like a blissful 20 minutes where I've almost forgotten, and then something reminds you and it hits you like a freight train. You think, oh God, extraordinary times that we are facing. So
Absolutely, yeah. I think it's that uncertainty of not knowing when it's going to end as well, which is just bizarre. The idea that there's obviously the announcement potentially going to be made later today, which will inevitably be that we're kind of extending the lockdown for another period, and it's just not knowing how long that's going to be for, and if it's another kind of 3 weeks that's then going to be reassessed, and you just kind
Absolutely. And I think there is a lot of genuine concern, especially from vulnerable members of my team, whereby, okay, what happens when we start to go back to business as usual? What happens when we start to go back into the offices and our kids start to go back to school? Are we going to have reprisals of the virus? And the answer is, quite likely. I do think the government's been doing a really good job so far. They've been very, considered, very steady in their approach. So fingers crossed we get through the worst of this and then we can get back to business as usual.
We've heard a lot from audience members that are having to kind of cancel or at least sort of postpone sustainability comms and announcements. In one of our surveys we did, we had from a chunk of audience members who are having to scale back investment in sustainable sort of products and services already as a result of this crisis. Is that something that you're feeling as well? Do you think you're going to sort of see that potentially across the construction space?
Yes, I mean, it was a real shame actually, because at Kier, so we launched a new sustainability framework to bring in the new decade and to signal a sort of a next 10-year period of significant action around sustainability within the business. And it was quite nice actually, because Kier, when I joined Kier, I became very aware that they've got a very proud and strong history of over delivering on their commitments to sustainability. We achieved our carbon targets 2-3 years ahead of our initial deadline, which was great. But then, of course, when this hit, you then have to question, what is it appropriate really to talk about, and where should our focus be? So the decision was made very quickly on that our focus as a company and where we can have maximum impact right now in the immediate term, whilst we are all in lockdown, having to be very careful about the way that we approach going to work if we are a critical team member, is around pollution prevention. So our new framework is structured around 5 pillars, the first one being pollution prevention. So what we did was we scaled back the limited resource that we had, and we pushed it all into that pillar to say, right, this is what we need to protect. Where we have got sites that are operating and adhering to the government guidelines, we need to ensure that we don't have any pollution incidences, and we make sure that our staff on the ground know exactly what they need to do with regard to their waste, with regard to having fuel on site, etc., 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 protecting biodiversity. I mean, I'm not sure a lot of people are aware, but this is we're in spring. This is a critical time for our natural habitats, critical time for our native species. It's absolutely paramount that we ensure that they are protected as well. You don't want to get through the whole year realizing that your natural environment missed out on its period for procreation, basically.
So what's happened with the announcement of that 10-year framework then? Is it something you're still going to kind of publicly reveal and announce and
Absolutely. So we've for me it's very much a case of just get on and do it. So we did a soft launch internally, and we are undertaking a number of the activities in the background. We're still sort of taking steps in order to achieve our various actions on this framework. We're just not making a song and dance about it, because it's I would say it's not appropriate in the current climate, and B, in the current climate, I think we just need to get on with it. So we will be doing a bigger launch to our external stakeholders to say, this is what we did at the beginning of the year. This is how we maintained a degree of momentum through the Covid-19 crisis, and coming out of that, this is where our baseline achievements sit today and where we're going to go for the rest of the year. So it was a shame, because I was hoping to do a bit more of an engagement piece around it, but we will live with that and continue to action what we need to do in order to travel in the sustainable direction.
Well, that's probably a good point to dig deeper into that kind of topic of engagement then. We're gearing up for our engagement week at the start of May, and a big focus of that is going to be on sort of driving engagement and behaviour change on sustainability and energy through these uncertain times. So, I mean, what advice do you have for fellow sustainability and environmental professionals who are perhaps struggling to find that balance? So you mentioned kind of that the focus is on potentially maintaining momentum, and that to some extent susty comms at the moment may not be appropriate or right. So how do you strike that balance?
Oh yeah, well, I mean, for a start, Susticom's absolutely right for sustainability professionals. What I meant was, in the context of the wider Kier Group, us, shouting from the hilltops around our sustainable achievements, when actually our priority today has to be keeping our staff safe. That was the distinguishing factor I was trying to make there. But yeah, it coming out of COVID-19, we are going to have multiple industries, businesses, particularly SME and organizations, that are going to be in a difficult situation in terms of their cash flow. This crisis is hitting our economy very hard. So in order to maintain momentum around sustainability, what we do not want is sustainability going back into that box of, oh, it's a nice thing to do when times are good. We've just come out of that period. Just over the last 3-4 years, sustainability has done that transition. We don't want to go back. What is absolutely critical is sustainable initiatives have got to be put in the language of commercial business, pounds and pence. Sustainability professionals, we know at our core it is the right thing to do. We know that it is the only way to have a sustainable society. But the decision makers over the next 18 months to 2 to 3 years, that's not going to be their driver. Their driver is going to be, how do I recover the business from this crisis, where we had to have a period of shutdown where we were making no money. So, our cash flow was drained, our very survivability was threatened. How do I now start to rebuild that cost center in the business? So where we have sustainability initiatives that are seen as a nice thing to do, those need to be translated very quickly into business critical, because it will cost you X but generate Y, and Y is 10 times bigger than X, and over this time frame, 6 months, 1 year, it's we've got to go back to that language of pounds and pence.
I think that's the fear that you mentioned in terms of that's held by a lot of our members, is this idea that it's taken years and years to sort of build up the momentum, that we finally then sort of seem to break that glass ceiling with the kind of the Greta effect, Blue Planet 2 effect. Suddenly climate and sustainability was higher on the agenda than it's ever been before. And I guess the fear is that as we enter this kind of period of economic sort of downturn, that we almost reset and wind the clock back to that stage where subsidy is seen as nice to have. So I mean, looking ahead, where do you see sort of sustainability and climate change sitting on the agenda generally, and what do you think the future looks like in the sustainability world?
Well, I think COVID-19 is actually going to do two things that will benefit the sustainability agenda and hopefully ensure that we don't go backwards. The first thing is, I remember a chap called Michael Brungart, who wrote, the first book around cradle to cradle thinking, this idea of closed loop thinking. And I listened to a radio interview that he did where he was trying to explain. He was asked, why do business leaders not get sustainability, do not get this concept of cradle to cradle thinking, when it is so obvious that it's what we should be doing? And he made this point of saying, well, it's like the 5-year rhino. And he said, if I said to you that in 5 seconds a rhino was going to blast through that wall behind you, what would you do? You'd take action. You dive for cover. You protect yourself. But if I said to you that in 5 years a rhino was going to blast through that wall behind you, what would you do right now, today? And the answer is nothing, because in your head you go, I've got 5 years. I've got time. COVID-19 has taken, for the first time, an existential issue that people normally perceive as being over there, someone else's problem, too big to comprehend. The individual differences or steps that I take make no difference at all. COVID-19 has forced people to wrap their heads very quickly around an existential issue, and around an issue whereby decisions that individuals make every day in terms of how they go outside, how they interact with people, the distances that they keep staying from home, has a significant impact on the infection rate for everyone else. So I think for the first time we will be exiting with this mindset already beginning to form around how we perceive, act on, acknowledge existential issues. So when we talk about sustainability and climate change, people are far more likely to be able to bring it down to home and understand what they can do as individuals to make a difference. Mm-hmm. And the other thing that was actually pointed out to me by another very smart individual was he highlighted, and I didn't realise this, but I did a bit of research, and he's absolutely right. He highlighted how throughout history, after periods of intense infection, opinions that were already in place or being formed before the infection hit. So you can go back to, swine flu, Spanish flu, even the Black Death. He highlighted to me. Those opinions accelerate. They speed up, and you end up with this tremendous period of change. So part of me thinks, well, we had these almost, just emerging from being embryonic thoughts around forming a circular economy, very much initially just focused on plastics, but then starting to move through into other materials. Are we going to have these opinions now accelerating at a pace? Are customers and critically consumers going to demand more from the sustainability space? Because for the first time, we are making that direct link between, or I should say, really evidenced link between sustainability, sustainable societies, healthy communities. It was a fascinating piece of research that's come out of the United States, demonstrating how people who live in highly polluted areas, in terms of high areas that have high air pollution, are far more likely to catch COVID-19 than those that live out in the countryside around cleaner air. Mm. So we've got all these really fascinating, potentially helpful links being made.
Yeah, well,
for the consumer.
Two great reasons for optimism there. So it was really, really fascinating. Thank you.
Trying to be optimistic.
It's both really, really fascinating analogies. Just back to Kier Group then, and your focus going forward, beyond kind of coronavirus, whenever that is, or almost kind of regardless, without sort of dismissing it, what are your sort of top priorities and hopes for the remainder of 2020 from a sustainability perspective? What would a successful calendar year look like for you?
Gosh. The big one for me is engagement, because we, Kiers had 18 months of tremendous change and company restructuring. We've got new talent in the business. We've got new business leaders coming in. And they're the ones that I need to lead the sustainability mindset on the ground. So we've, Kier is a decentralized business. We've got a number of business divisions. And for me, a successful year includes having that, business stream MD leading his commitment to sustainability, and I'm really pleased to say that we've got most of our leaders on board, but having them champion it, if I'm not having to champion it and it's actually one of a number of our MDs, that to me is a massive sign of success. When you've got sales directors, ops directors who become sustainable operations directors, sustainable sales directors, that's a massive piece of success for me. Another one would be taking the language of our framework that is, very, it is very much the language of business strategy, and I want to boil it down into the language for the everyday person, our everyday worker on site who knows the individual actions that he can take or she can take in order to help advance our sustainability agenda. And then the final one for me would be we need, as the industry collective, the construction sector, we need a consistent, recognised and bought into approach for measuring on carbon scope 3. There was a lot of great work that was being done by organisations such as the Sustainability Supply Chain Score, for example, in pulling everyone together. The supply chains in construction are vast, and I would like to see that work pick back up, maintain its momentum, and pull us all together so that we end up with that common methodology So again, we can exit 2020 saying we know exactly how we are going to record our carbon scope 3 and how we're going to do it across the board, so that we don't have different methodologies that then can become difficult to compare or know which is the right one to do.
Okay. Well, Jo, it's very inspiring to hear how sort of proactively and positively you're still sort of managing the Susty agenda in spite of these kind of times. I mean, what other advice or tips or thoughts do you have for fellow sustainability professionals who are perhaps working from home, obviously, and getting a little bit frustrated by the lack of connectivity, or even for those on furlough right now who are trying to keep themselves connected to this agenda? Do you have any sort of working from home tips, recommendations, things you do to kind of keep yourself ticking along?
Am I allowed to say Jen? No. Yeah, no. I think we've all got a close confidant or a mentor or a dear friend that we can always pick up the phone to and just have a rant. So I'm a big believer on when I have the bad days, and I do, human like everyone else, I have days where I wake up and I think, oh my God, this is one of those days. Just picking up the phone and just saying to someone on the other end, don't fix me, don't tell me what I should do because I know all that, just listen to me rant. So just letting it all out. I think we're very stoic, us Brits, and we tend to sort of keep it all in. Actually, it feels a lot better just to release the pressure. I go for a power walk every day. I find that I struggle to switch myself on in the morning unless I've gone for a power walk, just to oxygenate the brain, get everything thinking. The other thing I do is I've got my doodle, I call it my doodle book. So ideas that that I would want to do right now, but obviously we're somewhat restricted. I make sure I capture the idea and I keep playing around with it. So I'm mapping out in terms of, okay, what is the idea? How would I launch it? Who are my stakeholders? What are the pitfalls that I could fall into? What would the budget required? What could be the benefit, etc. And when I have a moment where I'm doing a task that I don't want to do, I'm struggling to motivate myself to do it, usually involves some form of report, I can take a little 5-minute break. So I'll do 10 minutes of that and then 5 minutes to my creative doodle book, and I have a play around. It just keeps me sane.
Nice. Yes. Some great tips. I haven't heard any of those before, so
Oh God.
especially that was probably my favourite. Okay, well, thank you so much, Jo. I did promise to keep these chats down to sort of 15-20 minutes. I'm not sure even how long we've been. I think about 20 minutes. So I'll wrap up there. This has been fascinating. I hope you've enjoyed it. I certainly have.
Very much. Thank you, Luke.
Thanks so much for being such a great guest. All the best with everything over the next few weeks and months at Kier Group. I think that's it. I'll bring it to a close. See you all again very soon for our next episode of Susty Talk. They are coming thick and fast, so I think we'll try and get another one in before the weekend. And in the meantime, stay safe, stay positive, and keep up the Susty Talk. Thank you. Goodbye.